6:04 p.m. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance and then the Chris, we're ready to go. Chris, are we all set?
Yep, all set.
Okay. Please stand. Place your right hand over your heart. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, now for the Goethe Pledge. As a citizen of the world, I will follow Goethe's circle of learning. Curiosity opens my mind. Ideas lead to knowledge. Responsible choices show respect. Cooperation strengthens others. Learners are courageous.
And empathy creates
community. And Peggy or Casey, do you want to lead it to us in German and then Spanish?
Als ein Bürger dieser Welt folge ich dem Kreis des Lernens. Neugierig, ideenreich, respektvoll, kooperativ, mutig, empathisch.
And I'll do the Spanish. Como ciudadano del mundo, seguiré el círculo del aprendizaje, creatividad, ideas, respeto, colaboración, valor y empatía.
Thank you. Next is roll call. Frank?
Present.
Pete?
Yeah, I'm here.
Danielle?
Here.
And Beacon?
I'm here.
All right. Put my hat on. Got a bad hair day. Okay, so regarding the agenda, I would like to mention a couple of items that will be tabled today. The GPA year-end report, and also the spring consolidated application, which has been held up by the Department of Education. So with those two items struck from our agenda today, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, all in favor? Frank?
Aye.
Pete?
Yes.
Danielle?
Aye.
Deacon?
Yes.
All right, that takes us to public comment. Casey, do we have any speakers today?
We do, and before I call out the first speaker, just a reminder, if you would like to speak, at the bottom of the participants tab, click raise hand. First up, we have Raya Richardson.
You're muted. Hadia, you're muted.
Casey, can we unmute her or?
Yes, there it is. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay, sorry about that. My name is Hadia Kennedy and I'm on the SEL committee. We, the Social Emotional Learning Committee, are deeply concerned with the elimination of the SEL consultant, Chris Massey Rhodes, from the 2020-2021 budget and urge the Board of Trustees to consider the implications. The purpose of the Social Emotional Learning Committee is to ensure the most favorable social emotional learning environment for the children at Goethe. Our parent volunteer committee is made up of accomplished professionals in such fields as clinical psychology, occupational therapy, behavioral therapy, sports science, intercultural education, and other fields, all of whose knowledgeable support is a key element. The SEL committee, both parent volunteers and child development expert, Chris Massey Rhodes, has been an inextricable part of Goethe since its inception, working in tangible ways to create a positive culture at our school. In fact, it was Chris and the SEL parents' efforts to create and implement the school's signature positive discipline policy, the Triadic Agreements that won GICS, the 2014 California Distinguished School Award, which is for exemplary and quality educational programs. A founder of the SEL committee and the author of the Triadic Agreements said, "As a clinical psychologist and mother of 3 school-age children, I am acutely aware of the social and emotional challenges our students face as a result of the current public health crisis. Emerging research data on increased mental health strains on families show an alarming mental health impact on children and families as a result of COVID-19. Therefore, I believe it is important that ever before it to have a social and emotional learning specialist on campus who can support students' social and emotional needs during this unprecedented time." She goes on to list the reasons Chris Massey Rhodes is that specialist, the most important reason being the deep relational trust she already has with the Goethe community, especially our children. Even last week, as the world began to experience a massive sea change in culture with renewed attention to racial inequality and civil rights, Chris brought her expert guidance to the community. We are concerned that the advice of professionals in these discussions has been so far disregarded. If this were a legal issue and the lawyer suggested we should retain counsel, will we shrug it off and say, we took law classes and feel confident that we can defend ourselves? The fact that there is even an ongoing discussion about this shows our community still has much to understand in regard to the social emotional learning. Keeping Chris in the budget also makes financial sense. With the current budget scenario that is called Option 3, the administrative team will be down 1 person 60 days of the year. What are reasons we should not budget for school-wide support when we have such a qualified individual available to us at a relatively minimal cost? We feel incredibly undervalued as a committee because we are providing multiple reasons why it is best to have Chris Massey Rhodes on the budget. We are saying our school needs this, and we desire our expertise and morale to be taken into consideration. Social emotional learning is not extra, it's not or special or just a class. It is a community culture that values the whole person, which should be reflected at all levels of the organization. Therefore, we again urge the board to take the advice and recommendation of this committee and the professionals within it seriously and keep Chris Massey Rhodes in the position of SEL consultant in the 2020-2021 budget. Thank you.
Angel Trong.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to come and speak on behalf of some of my colleagues and just express appreciation for our administrators, Dr. Jones, Casey, Scott, and Biggie, for all of their work this past year, and especially this past month, in their work with the Finance Committee and trying to present a balanced budget, a budget that will see our school continue to survive, and not just survive, but be committed to the high quality programs that we are known for and that all of our staff has committed so much of their time and energy to. We recognize what a huge task they've been given, and we also greatly appreciate their willingness to sacrifice so much of their own pay and effort and time for the sake of the organization and for the teaching staff and classified staff. Thank you.
Kathy Cheatham.
Hello. Thank you, Angel. We definitely all agree with that. I just am excited that tonight we're talking about the budget, and hopefully we can finalize everything the whole teaching staff, we're really looking forward to a budget being passed because this means contracts for us. At this point, we have no security for having a job in August. And there's sadly going to be 2 teachers that with this budget that are going to have to be let go. We need to make sure that they have enough time to go find another job. And it's a tough market out there. I just want to point out that there's several things on the budget that there's some items that we just kind of went, oh yeah, we can do that. Things like, oh, the Xerox machine, we can just change that. That is a change in culture, a change in way that teachers have to change in order to teach. There's one that's a $7,000, for the yearbook and for teaching 2 grades. And it's $7,000. And that's easy to say, it's not going to happen. And I have been received that money for several years. And I'm willing to still put in the hundreds of hours for the $2,000 for the yearbook. And you get $1,000 to teach 2 different grade levels. So when I taught kindergarten and 1st grade, you get $1,000 to do double the amount of work. And our teachers simply take it and we go, it feels good to get $1,000 because you've spent double the amount of time creating all this curriculum. But we're willing to say, we don't need that $1,000. We don't need those $2,000 this year because we will do whatever it takes to save the jobs of our peers and to stand behind and try to keep our peers supported. So looking forward to getting contracts soon. Thank you.
And at this time, there is no other public comment.
All right. On consent, I'd like to make a motion to approve the special board meeting minutes for May 29th.
Second.
All in favor? Frank?
Aye.
Pete?
Yep.
Danielle?
Aye.
And Deacon?
Yes.
All right. And that takes us to the ED report. Chris?
Okay. Can everybody hear me? I want to be sure I'm coming through. So the report today is fairly short because this was an added meeting. We have our meeting again next week, which is our annual meeting, which has a ton of things on the agenda. But I do want to actually let me. Can you take a minute?
Yep.
I want to spend a little time today. I usually give an update on our current enrollment, but that's steady. We've talked about that a couple months in a row now, that our enrollment was basically frozen back on February 29th in terms of the state. So what I'm showing you here is what is with us for what we're projecting. And this has an implication that has been brought up several times by different board members at the last 2 meetings, that our enrollment projection that we had in the budget was concerning, that we might be actually losing more, we might have less students. And there's been a couple of factors, but by far the biggest factor on this is COVID-19. And what this is doing, as we're finding out, families that are leaving the Los Angeles area to other places in the state, people who are families that are leaving outside of the state, and families that are leaving outside of the country. We were hoping that this would balance out with families coming in. And I think 2 months ago, I had made a point of saying, hey, we think that we're going to be seeing, more families in the post-lottery timeframe. We have not seen that materialize. So I want to spend a little time saying where we are at of what we do know at this point. So if you look along the third column here, this is broken down by grade level. The one that says intent to return yes on 3/16. That was the information we were going by, which we had surveyed in February and March to families of, are you planning to return? And that was the numbers that we had. You can see that we've updated that by 6.5 in the next column, that has dropped down. And what that is mostly related to, as I said, families that are moving. We have others that we've heard about but have not been able to confirm. And so there's a mixture of what we know and what we think, and we're trying to keep track of this in real time. So we're trying to be upfront with you guys of where we stand. So the other important factor, also updated as of June 5th, 6.5, is lottery acceptances. And lottery acceptances are the real acceptances that have come in since we've offered positions. And we offered most of those positions right after the lottery day, but we've been giving others as we've gone. Anywhere we've had any type of waiting list, we've drawn on that. We now only have a waiting list at kindergarten, and we have a very small waiting list at second grade. But you can see those are the two grade levels where we've maxed out to be able to take advantage of where we actually have students. These also take into account if there's been a student who's been retained or any kind of shift that's happened that way. So these are as up to date as we have. So the important line is in green here that says actual enrollment. And you can see that compared to before, where we had the actual enrollment on May 13th, where it was 439, and we were projecting a budget at that number. We have dropped since then, and we now are at 428. So later when we talk about budget, there'll be an implication on this. But it's unfortunately not moving in the right direction with regard to where we stand right now with enrollment. You can also see that the targeted grade level enrollments in the very last column that relate to targeted class size, there's always the possibility of somehow kids coming in and we're filling up classes all the way. And if we did, we'd have 470 kids. But where we stand right now, that is not really in the cards. We have, we're ending the year with the enrollment number was at 416. And so this is not where we are projecting. So I just want to be sure there weren't any questions on this enrollment projection that we are now giving to you.
Frank, I'll open it to you. Any questions?
Yeah, no, I think it's good that we have the most conservative and the most realistic assumptions we're currently having with the budget, and the budget is still balanced on 428. So that's a good news. Thank you.
Pete, any questions?
No, that was very clear. Thank you.
Danielle?
No questions for me. I think given everything that's going on right now, it's understandable why some families are moving.
And BK?
None for me, thank you.
All right, please continue, Chris.
Thank you. I just want to give a quick update on Prop 39. Not a lot of change. We are continuing to pursue the alt agreement. We have still not received a formal response from LAUSD either way. We had asked for an alternate agreement to get us back to our current footprint, which would have given us 2 additional classrooms is what we've asked for. We are going to reduce that as part of the budget proposal you'll hear later. We think we can make things work with 1 additional classroom. And so that's going to be our request, but I wanted to be sure that was clear. That'll be in the budget presentation coming up. And then finally, we are working with Marina Del Rey Middle Schools to discuss reopening plans and scenarios. Biggie and I actually had a really good conversation with Ms. Machado, really lengthy and involved just this week. And just talking about kind of the whole picture of what's happening, and we're trying to make this work together. We value that, and so we are not trying to go rogue on them. We just want to make sure we're part of the conversation, and so far that's exactly what's happened. So that's a good thing with regard to Prop 39. Related to this, I also did want to give a quick outreach update because, as I mentioned, our numbers are down and we've had small numbers at our virtual tours, which that really has been concerning. 1, 2, 3 families, but very small numbers. And that has resulted in few post-lottery applications. We are planning for new family outreach in June, so that will be personal and direct with the families that have been accepted, because we want to be sure that we're wooing those families and making sure they feel connected as best we can under this COVID situation, but that is coming. We have already been expanding social media posting. Nazmia has done a very excellent job of we've shifted from just telling the story of the school to also putting out things that are really more towards attracting new enrollment. And so that has been ongoing and will continue. We have put out Argonaut ads for traditional media as well. And we're moving in a different direction in the month of July and leading into the opening of school. And that is, we are going with vector media and bus back ads. We've never done that before. We feel like we're in a situation we have to do things differently. And so these will be on Culver City buses. We looked at Santa Monica and we looked at Culver City and the bus routes. And the Culver City bus routes go far beyond Culver City. They're not just within that city. They go all the way to the airport. They go all the way throughout West LA. And they seemed like a natural for where we're trying to draw from families, particularly LA Unified families. So that's what we're trying to reach with bus back ads, and we are working on that at present, and hope to have that visible out in the community in July. So that is the end of my ED report. Unless there are any questions, then we can move forward on the agenda.
Chris, I have a question. The bus ads, that's actually really interesting. Did you, I understand Culver City has a longer reach. Did you check for the, what was it, MTA, I guess? Los Angeles, and that wasn't comparative?
We did not. We were looking at those two because of size, the assumption being that MTA is so broad and potentially expensive. We can look into that as well. But I do want to, the overlay of the Culver City bus routes was like ideal for people who could realistically get to our school, where we're not wasting money having things in other spots. But we could potentially look in other means for that in the future.
All right, Frank?
Give me always a second for me to turn on the video and the sound. I have no further question. Thank you.
All right, Pete?
I'm good, thank you.
Danielle?
Sorry, I had to unmute. So thank you for the update. I have noticed the great social media content, all of that new content, and it looks really great. 2 questions on that. One is, and I'm happy to talk to Frau Akbaba directly because she does a really great job with this. I think for social media, we can potentially consider media targeting for some of the content, where you can target specific demographics, moms in a certain area, if we wanted them to see this type of content. So people outside of the Goethe community, to kind of resonate with them on what Goethe is doing. Because, you know, our current content is people within the community and people who are following. So I'm happy to talk to her about that if she's interested. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, maybe there's opportunity. I personally think all of the content is great. Maybe there's opportunity to send a communication to families, a piece of content that we could all share on behalf of Goethe, so that where we're reaching our own community on social media. So if we're talking about if we're all talking about our child's school positively in a positive way, then there's content that could reach the community that in an even broader sense. So that's my only comment.
Thank you, Danielle. I know you have a lot of good experience to share in this area, and I would encourage you to reach out to Frau Akbaba.
Okay.
I think that would be those are very appropriate things moving forward.
Perfect.
All right, Beacon.
I'm good, thanks.
All right, we are then going to move on to the approval of the 2019-20 Education Protection Account funding plan. I'd like to make a motion to approve it. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, Chris, would you like to go into it? Thank you.
Sure. This is something that comes up every year. It's part of a law that was passed related to a tax that was put on, I believe it was back in 2014, and then it was renewed. And when it was renewed by law, it goes on till 2030. And as such, a requirement of that law is that we state where that money is going and that we post that on our website. We've done this every year. This is the time in which we do it. So nothing changed there. And it's stating that this money that comes in, we're going to spend it on basically teacher salaries and benefits. That's the direction of that money. This would be no change from previous years.
All right. Frank, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Pete?
No questions.
Danielle?
No questions.
Beacon?
None for me.
Right. All in favor to approve the Education Protection Account plan? Frank?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Danielle?
Yes.
Beacon?
Yes.
And an aye for me as well. Okay, moving on. We have tabled item D, budget. Chris.
Let me just before we hand it over to Chris, let's get the motion on the table first. So I move. Before we go into discussion, I move to approve the final 2020-21 budget and 3-year forecast as provided by the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Frank, and I second. All right, Chris, you want to?
Let me just paraphrase a little bit as a finance chair. I've thought a little deeper about it and structured my thoughts a little bit before we hand it over to Chris, if with your permission, Yazir.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Yeah. So here it goes. So our goal as a school must be to have the greatest possible educational success or outcome as laid out or programmatically laid out in our charter, while really avoiding bankruptcy, right? So there is an embedded conflict. In general, as a nonprofit company or corporation, we are not in the business of paying investors, but we are still obligated to run our business as efficiently as possible, and therefore must make a considered effort to be financially sustainable. As a niche school, we have very little economies of scale effects or opportunities, and public funding is insufficient to fund our entire program. Our substantial community fundraising closes this funding gap. As a matter of financial risk management and based on our strategic goals, we still should strive to generate a small annual surplus, allowing us to guard our school from black swan events like the public funding crisis caused by the COVID-19 virus, and to fund for future investments investments such as scaling our schools and acquiring our own site. We also must be mindful of future liabilities, in particular the pending over-allocation Prop 39 penalties, which will need some sort of resolution latest before our charter renewal in 2023. During the process of our annual budget adoption, and as usual, the Finance Committee collaborated with the administration. While the administration created various individual budget proposals based on their institutional knowledge and as subject matter experts, the Finance Committee scrutinized their assumptions and endeavored to assess the impact on learning and our financial sustainability. And when I talk about learning, I mean also our community. I, as a matter of fact, have received about 10 emails from community members directed to me personally. And after a reminder from Danielle last year, I responded to only one. But I want to acknowledge that I received them and that they went into the overall consideration. Ultimately, we as the Finance Committee issue a recommendation to the Board of Trustees to either adopt or reject the proposed budget. The budget in front of you is balanced. It was unanimously adopted by the Finance Committee, and we recommend adopting this budget as presented. It is our assessment that the proposed reductions are grounded in the principles of being furthest away from the classroom. The budget is also in line with our values of maintaining high quality teachers and instructions. Due to the anticipated state funding cuts, the entire staff, classroom and front office will be absorbing previously outsourced services provided by outside consultants or internal coordinators. Staff is providing this additional work at reduced pay. Outside consultant contracts are being renewed where possible, /feasible, or needed. The Finance Committee followed the directions given by our subject matter experts regarding the matter verbatim. The administrative team has deemed this budget and the associated reductions to be in line with the principle of preserving our core educational model, which is IB, German immersion/acquisition, Spanish acquisition, and the whole child learning approach by preserving art, PE, and mandatory SEL and our voluntary SPED services, our mandatory SPED services and SEL services as well. While enormously painful, this budget also addresses our prior year structural deficit, and it maintains or provides an attractive platform/foundation for current and future students/enrollment. The budget development was transparent. The public had adequate opportunity to provide input and feedback. The Finance Committee would like to thank the public and all other stakeholders for their participation in the process. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Chris.
Okay. Thank you. So in putting together the presentation for the Finance Committee, we were asked last week at the board meeting to rethink. We had presented an option 1 and an option 2. And an option 1, at the outset, I was saying, I don't even know how we would do some of these things. Option 2 was the recommendation, but the option 2 did not create a balanced budget. So the board asked us to go back and rethink that and give it another round of are there other things, is there anything that we can find and to push forward. So I'm going to talk through today what are the line items of option 3. And option 3 is what was recommended by the Finance Committee for the board to consider. It also is more updated information than you were provided a week ago, because this is an ongoing process and we keep getting new information. And we were able to gather more detail about how much savings actually were there in, for instance, of furloughs. So there's a number that's higher than we had last week. And that's because we were able to calculate it more specifically, more accurately. So everything that you're getting is with more accurate, it's more accurate, and it's as accurate as we can get it at this point for this discussion. So I'm going to start with wherever you see option 3, you'll also notice on the left-hand side in column A, there it's in yellow. It was our way of not only tracking what we were expecting, but it's also how we made sure that that was actually taken out of the budget spreadsheet that we work with. So in working with Ryan with XED, we were checking ourselves to make sure each thing is taken out and taken out properly, because these were not simple, just click a line. A lot of them involved many calculations and thought and logic that had to be gone through. So I'm going to start with kind of the up at the top, which is the across the board for everybody kind of difficult cost savings. And we had talked about doing a pay cut, and we had talked about a number of 5% across the board, but we added more on to administration. When we went back to our staff, it was very clear they felt a far better approach to this was the potential of furloughs. We realized there's a chance that furloughs could not happen if the state does not allow for a certain number of days to be waived on instructional days and instructional minutes. We expect that to happen, so we've moved forward on furloughs. So line 3 is a 10-day furlough for the entire staff. This is teachers, instructional aides, and administrators. All are listed in line 3 for 10 days. This is a calculated number that we feel is as accurate as we can be. On line 4, we also took beyond the 10 days. There was a definite direction from the board, and there was also an agreement of administration from the get-go that they would take on a larger burden in terms of pay reduction or anything that was set up with regard to furloughs. And so line 4 was the larger amount that we considered, and it was a grand total. Instead of 10 days, it would be 20 days for principal, assistant principal, and director of operations. And it would be a grand total of 25 days for me as the executive director. So those are two major pieces, and they're a large amount of money, so I want to be sure we understand exactly what they are. I'm going to keep scrolling down now, and I'm going to find the next place where option 3 pops up. So option 3 also includes the 2 positions we've been talking about in option 1 and in option 2, which is an NYP teacher. Instead of having 3, which was our original hope and desire, of cutting that to 2 and the associated savings with that. And in line 12, the reduction of 1 PYP position that would be the pulling of a coordinator out of back into the classroom and not having an outside of classroom coordinator. Those were both chosen because we are still serving students, but we were able to not hurt the classroom directly or as directly. All of this hurts. Line 13 was the $8,000 saved by redoing the way we set up coordinators in IB and language. Line 14 and line 15 are connected. Line 14 is a full-time instructional aide that we were able to find in the budget that was still in there, that we were able to remove when we started talking about reducing for the kids that we have. So we had one less kindergarten class, and we were talking about first grade reduction of service to students and teachers in first grade and a reduction there. So there's a line 14 is a reduction of an instructional aid position that we already had through attrition. We were able to reduce. Also on line 15 is 2 part-time instructional aid positions that we were not able to do through attrition. So those would need to be positions that are reduced. I'm going to scroll down a little further. In option 3, we came up with a different way of structuring reductions, again, away from students and in the office. So we made a reduction of an hour a day at attendance and an hour a day at the entryway, the office staff, office clerk position. These are painful and will provide less service to staff and families, but we felt we could figure out a way to do that. And we had part of this in there before, and we did it in a way that we thought was fair. So we made reductions of 1 day, 1 hour per day. As was mentioned already tonight, there's we always have had in there this removal of split grades assignments and yearbook stipend, which saves about $7,000, and that's been in option 1, 2, and 3. In line 26, and I want to pause on this for a second because this has been an issue that is really hits people's hearts. And please do not think that these were easy discussions. This was a SEL consultant position that has been with the school for many years. And in our discussions about contracts, there was a sense from staff that this is a part of our overall SEL program. It's a really important piece, but that could be handled in-house. I think there's been really valid points also mentioned about the reduction level now that we're talking about furloughs and the level we're talking about furloughs, number of days for administration. That's something that it very much affects how much service can be provided. In option 2, we gave a kind of compromise position, which was a reduction of 40 days to 25 days. And the resultant savings from that, instead of $7,200, that resultant savings was $2,700. This is one of those line items that is we've gone backwards and forwards on this. The Finance Committee in their option 3 did put this as a reduction. But I want to express the difficulty we have in trying to figure out how we would give services to, for instance, families that are grieving. That has been a big piece of what has been provided through this contract. So this is a very difficult line item, and I just wanted to point that out in particular, how difficult the thought process has been on this. Another vendor contract in line 27 was difficult, but nowhere near as difficult because we came at the idea of MYP. The program was either to provide from inside our system or provide from outside. And we felt that through the MYP program and the expertise that we have across our staff, and the creativity that we've had in scheduling, there is a way to make this work. Will it be easy? No. The scheduling is going to be extremely difficult, and it's going to cause different work for people. But this was something that people in our conversations and in feedback that we got through surveys and different pieces that we've had with staff, is there was a real sense that there's a way to make this work. Let's try to keep our people whole. And so that was where the elimination of this vendor, who've been with us only a year, and while we've been very happy with both vendors under MYP, it's not something that we're recommending moving forward. Continuing forward down this list, there were a whole series of things that staff had stepped forward and said, hey, let's do things a little differently and let's save some money by doing it. How we do photocopies is going to be radically transformed next year in in how we set it up, both in paper, which is line 33, and our contract, which we're still on a contract through half the year, but at that point we can look at how we would change it. And so rethinking and downsizing our use of office supplies, paper, and copies. And along with that, a creative use of Scholastic dollars in line 34. So all those three together are just like rethinking how we do stuff. On line 35, there's a $7,500 amount that we came up with a creative way in option 3 to redesign our classrooms so that we would not need the 23rd classroom. We could make it do with 22. So this would affect, if we are able to get an alt agreement, and we had put that into the original budget, this would be less rent than was in the original budget because we were planning for that. So this is accepting that we're going to have a little bit smaller footprint, but hopefully not as small as we've been given, which is only 21 rooms, that we would build it up to 22, but no longer ask for 23. Another area we came up with, we had talked about this as having an alumni hybrid, a hybrid for the alumni program, half online and half at school. In thinking about it again, we felt we could actually try for the year to do it all online and not pay any rent and still charge the same amounts so that the income is the same, but we would not have the alumni program on campus except for maybe a special event or two, something like that. So we would save $5,400 in doing so. And that, and then we'd have to look at the end of the year and see, did this work? Was it functional? Did we lose people involved in it? But we felt like, because this is beyond where the kids that are enrolled, that it's an area we could cut. So 5,400 we have listed there. We had a couple other items. I mentioned the last time that we talked about Arrowhead Water, and we took another look at that, and we really questioned whether or not during the COVID crisis, which we decided is going to be over by midway through the year, we basically said, I don't know that we're even going to be able to use water dispensers in the same way we had before. So we came up with a halving of that amount to $4,500 for the year. And we'll have to monitor that closely as we go to see what we can do to reduce the amount of water, but still have it there for emergencies. So figuring that out, that was our thinking on water. And we reduced it from 9,000 estimate to a 4,500 estimate. In the same way, all across options 1, 2, and 3, we have had the independent study process change. We think we can do that and make it an online process that will be much better for parents much better for students, much better for teachers, and much better for our attendance clerk. And as such, we think we can get an extra day for about half the students. And so we put this into our income presumptions and boosted our expectation from 96%, which is already high, to 96.2%. So that's where we're expecting. And then finally, there's $3,600 that we're renegotiating phone service, and that's been in option 1, 2, and 3. So you've heard that before. So let's look at the bottom. What are the totals? These are more exact totals based on real numbers than you received previously. So all of that has been updated. But you can see option 1 was basically a break-even budget. Option 2 kept us about 100,000 short. And now option 3 is another break-even budget. And option 3 is the one that was recommended by the Finance Committee. What does this mean for us? Well, this is an ongoing process. The budget doesn't end today or when it's passed. I mean, hopefully passed today, but it doesn't end there. A budget can be looked at again and reviewed, and changes can be made to the budget. It's a living document. With that being said, even since the Finance Committee met, things have changed. I mentioned at the outset of this meeting, when I gave my ED report, that enrollment is a specific problem that is getting worse on us. And we need to address that in the budget. So these numbers that you see here are not based on the same enrollment number that you had seen previously. We are dropping the enrollment number of expected enrollment from 439, which how it was built, to 420. In my ED report, we showed a number at 428. That number could go up, that number could go down. We're anticipating that number could go down. And so 420 was the number that we came up with. So how are we still at a balanced budget? There was actually, that was all on the income side, is how many students you're bringing in depends on how much income you're going to get. But we had one bit of good news finally after all this. And that bit of good news was that when XED was doing the calculations, and this is not XED Ryan, this is XED the company that Ryan works for, that we contract with. XED has their people that work on the spreadsheet on the back end of that, and they adjusted for what the May revise. They kept doing calculations, and those calculations came out better in our favor to about $77,000. And so between an improvement in our income, a reduction in our enrollment, and the new savings that were provided in option 3, we have brought you a balanced budget of negative $350. We also need to look at the out years. I'm going to make this a little bigger. No, it's not letting me. Let me go to, I'll see it as a PDF. Hold on. Okay, is that a little bigger? You can see it? This is the budget detail. Oh, I actually wanted to get the summary. Let me pull up the summary. This is the budget summary. Let me make it big enough to see. So this is our budget summary, which shows, I'm going to start up here with enrollment. So we're at 416 in our current year, which is where we ended up on February 29th. We are at 420 for the current year, or for the coming year, our forecast year. In the out years, year 2, we're planning for 463. And in the out years, we're planning for 506. Those are reduced numbers from what you saw previously because we were reducing the first year. We also had to reduce the second year. We also had to reduce the third year. We made judgment calls looking at all grade levels and what we really thought would happen and what we thought was legitimate for those numbers. But we needed to change those. Otherwise, things would look wonderful because we were projecting too much in the out years. Moving down this list, the important thing is here at the bottom under net income. In the current year, we are still looking at the same that you saw before, 187,735. Keeping in mind, the year started with a $401,000 deficit, and we are now projecting 187,735. And maybe before the end of the month, that'll even get better. But that's where we stand right now. In the forecast year, $513 to the positive. In year 2, we're down in the negative. And that's because we are planning for adding another teacher at middle school, which is a cost, but we still haven't seen the economies of scale kick in at the middle school yet. The other thing is, in the forecast year that shows 513, we have furloughs. In year 2 and year 3, we do not have furloughs listed there. So we can see that there's a downturn in year 2. It's negative, but it balances things out in year 3, and we're moving in the proper direction in year 3 towards continuing in a balanced budget. So if you look at the 513 and 777,000, and you look at the 81,000 that's negative, they basically wash out. It's $4,000 or so that's to the negative, but it's basically a balanced budget. So across 3 years, we also have a balanced budget. Our cash balance is dependent on when we get paid by the state and all the different pieces that come into that, but we are keeping a cash balance that allows us to remain acceptable even with our lowered enrollment numbers. So I share this because it's important that we understand all of these pieces come together, but this is the piece that says we've taken all those cuts that we talked about and we've put them in here, and this is where we land with the best knowledge that we have as of today and moving forward. Could things change tomorrow? Sure, they changed last week, but this is where we're at today, and this is what we think will move us forward. So with that, I'm going to close off my presentation and open it up for questions or comments from the board regarding our budget.
Thank you, Chris. And we had instructed 5 line items to be further explored. and I think you've met them. Thank you very much, and I think you've highlighted them. But of course, I will leave it to each board member. Several pointed out some of those line items. As far as the impact to the program, where we were last week was you had option 2, and balanced budget looked within. So brass tacks. What does the core of the school look like? What's going to impact enrollment? And based on a balanced budget, what does the school look like in 3 to 4 years? Not thinking about penalties and things like that.
I'll answer that as best as I can. What does the school look like relates to what we chose to cut and what we chose not to cut. I mentioned that we're coming from a $400,000 deficit. We're now adding 500,000 more cuts onto that, or thereabouts, almost $900,000 turnaround. But that doesn't come without pain. The good news is we've managed to save things that we think are most valued at the classroom level, and that is things like PE and all that program provides for our kids, and art and all of that program that our program provides for our kids, and Spanish, and as it relates to especially middle school, and how art relates to middle school, and how PE relates to middle school, and how those programs relate to supporting our teachers to be able to run our IB program. So even though we're taking out some things, we have less support for IB directly, we have less support for language directly, there are things that are still in our program. There will be less of, because we're shifting some of the priority from elementary to middle with the people that we have. We can't turn them into 3 people, even though we wish we could. But we think by doing some general and across the board reductions of their time at the elementary level and the shifts that go to the middle school level, we're going to maintain positive feel in the school. We're going to maintain positive feel in the community and building enrollment to the best that we can under very difficult situation. And in the end, is this enough to keep our school solvent? I believe that it is. I believe that the 3-year forecast says that it is, far more so than what we presented last week, which was not a balanced budget. So from that aspect, are there items that could be changed or adjusted? There always are, but this is the best thinking we had as a finance committee coming through.
All right, thank you, Chris. So with that, I will hand it off to other board members. I ask that we try to not mention names of individuals or staff, or contractors, and also keep in mind that we understand that these cuts are drastic, and the questions are going to be, they could be pointed, but that should not be misunderstood to be a point of some sort of point for or against. That being said, I will hand it off. Frank, if it's all right with you, would you yield your time back to the other members of the board since
Absolutely. As a finance chair, I have in the lead into this conversation, I have expressed the position as the finance chair. As a board member, regardless, I can wait and I can hold my comment until, yeah.
All right, thank you, Frank. All right, Pete.
All right, thanks. So I've got a comment, and then I'll have a question. So it has certainly been interesting, and I have to say that despite the fact that this board meeting is a difficult one, at least for me personally, it's easier than the one that was last year at this time when I was doing it at 3 in the morning in Germany. So there's always a silver lining somewhere. So the thing that I find, I guess in this process, I've learned 3 things, mainly from listening and from the emails that the parents have sent. And I think it's great that the parents contact the board members so we get some feel for what they're thinking. And I think the 3 things I've learned from that is one, everybody seems to agree that Chris is doing a fantastic job, and that is a good thing to hear. And that will lead to my question in just a moment. The second thing I learned is that the people who like SEL really like SEL and think it's really important, and so they've had quite the cheering committee for SEL, which I think is great. And the third thing I find interesting is that several of the parents, more than one email, several of them, more than 2 actually, they've been quite in support of the PE program, and somehow it appears if I didn't like PE, which is not the case, but many have been in support of the PE program, and I've also noticed that PE and some of the other staff, that I guess given the current circumstances, that this notion of diversity has become very important among our staff. And I certainly agree with that, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity that the parents believe that diversity is a good thing, and I certainly hope that this momentum carries forward next year when we see gaps in performance among students, diverse students, different from the students that are of the parents sending the letters, that they are just as concerned about the performance of those kids. And I think that's really great, and hopefully that moves forward. So that leads to my question. So Chris, since everyone has a lot of faith in your ability to guide the school, as do I, my question for you then is, if we start with option 3, what 3 things would you wish you could put back into that budget in order of priority? Not to put you in a spot or anything, but.
Yeah, no, not at all. There's a couple of things that are the toughest on me personally, and they're not always related to size of amount, and so some of this has to do with scope of how much are we talking about. But I think teachers putting forth such a positive, not teachers, staff, everybody putting forth, hey, we're willing to, let's dive on something like furloughs so that we can try to save what we think, save what we can in terms of people and in terms of program in the school. The reduction in furlough days is one of the things I would definitely like to see. It's been hard for me to see instructional aids reduction is a very tough one. Both of those are high cost items, not varying degrees, but that's one that is very hard for me. And I'll say the third one is the SEL contract. It's a smaller amount, so it's harder to gauge. I actually, one of the things that was mentioned in today's meeting had an effect on me as I was thinking. Really, the amount of time that we are dealing with no administrators, that's going to hit you next year. You'll feel it. But we do think that's the right way to go forward. But we're gonna have some difficulties, and especially for I'm thinking of the support of families. That's where that one comes in my head. So those are three that I would put out there and answer your question.
Great, thanks. So are we going to have a second round of comments and questions?
Absolutely.
All right, then I'll stop. Thanks.
All right. Danielle?
Yes. I wanted to say a huge thank you to the admin and to the finance committee for really thoughtfully considering all of the board's requests from the last meeting and putting together a really thoughtful and balanced budget. I also wanted to acknowledge that our ED's contract is a 2-year contract, and this would essentially mean that I'm not using his name, would be making voluntary adjustments to his contract that would be significantly lower than agreed upon terms from a year ago. So I wanted to acknowledge that. It was mentioned in the finance committee meeting, but I also wanted to mention that here. What I also wanted to mention was something that our ED, who will remain nameless, touched on briefly also, was that the furlough days. I know that we discussed this at our last board meeting as a consideration. And I appreciate the fact that this was a serious consideration and also brought into option 3 of the budget. But, you know, something that was mentioned, and I think is a really good point that it was raised, is that this will impact families in the community more drastically next year. The fact that admin has committed to more furlough days. So while I don't want to kind of blow up this budget because I realize the timing is so critical, I do wonder if this is something we could discuss, maybe just adjusting that slightly. And in this case, we wouldn't come in completely balanced, but we'd come in close to balanced if we just maybe adjusted those days slightly. Because my understanding is, while admin will be on furlough, not using names, but knowing the admin in the way that they are, they're not going to really be on furlough. They probably will be working and they probably will be serving the community. So I do want to acknowledge that and potentially build that back into the budget, understanding that the budget is nimble and also understanding we want to meet the final budget tonight. And then I also wanted to mention too that I have received a lot of emails from parents in the community, and I really appreciate all of the input. It is really helpful when we discuss these topics because it helps us determine, you know, which things matter most to families and what do people value most about this school. So I do appreciate that. I want to acknowledge that I read all of them. And I also wanted to touch on something that, you know, has been mentioned, but has been a very emotional topic, which is the SEL consultant. And I think a really good point that was raised at last board meeting was a point that, you know, when parents are understanding, as far as fundraising is concerned, maybe there's opportunity now for fundraising that could take place on behalf of the SEL committee for something like this. We know that the first half of the year will probably look very different for students. So there may not be a need for the SEL consultant, but in the second half of the school year, maybe there's opportunity to fundraise for that. So that's something I just wanted to mention, given the passion from the community. And I don't have any other comments right now.
I think you can.
Did you call me, Sarah? I didn't hear.
I did, yes.
Okay, sorry, thank you. I want to thank the admin team and all the teachers and parents and everyone for being so well involved in such civil discourse in order for us to finalize this. As you all know, as co-chair of the SEL committee and a board member, SEL is very close to my heart. It is the reason that I am at Goethe. And Danielle, I strongly disagree, because school will be looking different when we begin is exactly when our kids need our SEL consultant at our school. She is the one who is there for kindergarten transition to help with the crying children and the ones who are having a difficult time. This is her role and her purpose and why we have her. You know, we're talking about diversity. She is one of 2 women of color that work with our children. She is a Black woman. And, you know, we as a board, I think we have to lead by example. And to use a kind of crass term, I think we need to put our money where our mouth is. Our page in the Argonaut newsletter says that we provide SEL. Not $1 of our budget is going towards SEL. The SEL committee strongly recommends, again, a committee of professionals. This is what these people do for work. Completely disregarded. We're telling our kids Black Lives Matter. Part of that is hiring Black people and keeping their jobs for them. So I would really like to see this board step up to the plate and lead by example, put Chris Massey Rhodes back on the budget, and maybe even add 20 days and stagger it so that she's there when admin is missing.
All right. Thank you, Beacon. All right, back to so I've listed a couple of things, and I'll get the discussion started again. Everyone has to keep in mind that we are voting on the budget that has been presented. So that being said, a couple of questions. I know Pete will have a few more. I will hand it back to everyone else. As far as furlough, Danielle, your question about you know, adding back more. This is for my question to you, Danielle. Is it your intention to not approve the budget or send it back to committee to play with the numbers? What exactly, I guess, would be the directive? What would be something we would vote?
That wasn't my intention to send it back to committee. I just,
okay.
If we were able to approve it and consider it as a caveat, that would be fine with me.
Okay. Yep.
You know how we sometimes approve things and we make a tiny adjustment, you know, where maybe we would say, okay, maybe we take 25 days down to 22 or something of that nature. Right. I'd be open to that, but it's not my intention to bring anything back to committee. We don't have the time for that. And I think this is also, again, like Dr. Jones said, the budget is the budget as it is, as it's approved, but there's always opportunity to review and make adjustments.
And yeah, may I propose that?
Can I also answer? Oh, go ahead, sir.
No, please go ahead.
I also wanted to touch on something related. I don't know if this would be in the next round of comments, but you know what? I'll hold off on this one.
Okay. So, would it be acceptable to review the number of furlough days once Chris comes back with an implementation schedule?
Yeah, that would be fine with me.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then I know Pete, you had asked about PE. We all know Pete hates PE. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. Pete does not hate PE. But Chris, if you can just sort of go back to that item, because I know what Pete had asked about was exploring PE, other sources for PE, and your analysis of it was just, if you can bring a little bit more clarity on that for me.
So we did actually look at PE as an option, and I went over this more at the finance committee, but we looked at what the cost differential would be in terms and what kind of savings there would be if we subcontracted out. And we did find that there could be some potential savings, but it wasn't a huge amount of savings. It was about $5,000 of a differential that we would be able to save through contracting out. We did not feel it was appropriate to do any kind of internship and rely on that we needed to do it with an actual where you pay someone for this service and get that service. But we felt what would be lost with that small amount of savings was all the buy-in with our school, all the positive pieces that go with it, the knowing every student that comes with that position, and then how that is parlayed into other areas of the school, not just in PE, but from everything we do, from valet down to all the activities that we do at lunchtime and different pieces. So we did look at that. We thoughtfully analyzed it, but we came to a very, very strong conclusion that the benefits that might be found by contracting that out would not outweigh that small amount of money would not outweigh what the benefit we have with having an in-house person, particularly as we're expanding middle school.
All right, thank you. And I'm sure Pete may have more questions, but I just want to get the ball going on that. And then about SEL, so and I'm gonna dig, I'm gonna stir the pot here, so just try to what does the consultant, what are her deliverables? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it annually? And who's measuring the actual deliverables and the content?
So this has varied, and I'm trying to get the history of things, but basically there is a contract that we do that's up to 40 days. And it is for work as designated that relates to anything with social emotional learning. Where this has been most successful for me anyways, in my observations, has been with support for families in crisis. And sometimes it's grieving. We've had several situations that have fallen in that, unfortunately, sadly. But it's also working on where a problem is larger with a large group at a grade level, or a particular group of girls, or a particular group of boys. There might be friend issues that are helped out. And so those are the types of things. It is not something that we've measured, that I've personally measured directly. I've had conversations in the year, but not I think that would be one of the pieces that I'd like to know more specific deliverables that are agreed upon on the outset. But that's this is my first year here, and I'm the new one, so that's where I stand on that.
So part of the responsibility of a budget and the board's approval of a budget is financial control and accountability. So I do recognize that there are lots of cuts here, and even board members here are swayed by one or the other more so. But ultimately, the purpose of a budget is control. The benefit of a charter school is the nimbleness of our budget. That if we discover, sorry, I hate to use this example, but water, if we absolutely need to go back to the Arrowhead water cooler, I think Chris will bring it forth, and I can't imagine with a rational business case for it that the board would not approve of putting that item back on the budget. But ultimately, the purpose of it is control and is financial planning. So with that in mind, would it be conceivable to renegotiate a contract that stipulates core deliverables that will be provided as a service to Goethe. And not necessarily vague, I'm not saying that what you have is vague because I haven't seen the contract, but I think the discussion has been, one of the options you gave was from 40 hours or minimizing hours, but to become more concrete as a set of deliverables for the organization. And table that conversation until those deliverables are brought forth to the board, and we can vote on it in August. I'm throwing that out there as a straw poll. I think Chris, with a nod of the head, that's something you would support.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I certainly
so
bring forth
okay.
anything that the board wants.
All right. So then, if that's what I mean is by go back, set up a list of deliverables, go back to your stakeholders, which is possibly the committee, on the top 5 things that they would like out of this consultant for the first quarter, second quarter, break it down, and then bring that forward back to the board, where the board can anyway. So I'm asking for a straw poll, and I will each board member can say yay or nay to that, and after their comments to the discussion, I will now hand it off to Frank.
Thank you, Yazir. I have expressed my initial lead into the conversation. I've expressed I've expressed the position as a finance committee chair, which is different from my position as a regular board member. I have these two points of view, right? So granted, I went to business school and I've been brainwashed, in that process in the business school, right? But my background, as family upbringing, is I grew up in a union household, and I grew up. My mom was a speaker, women's advocate at a federal office in Berlin. So you never lose your cultural background in a sense of where you're coming from, right? And then on the other hand, I have this, I read McKinsey studies, right? And then say the academic studies and what makes a good school, for example, what makes a good education system. And over the year I learned a lot of it, but for them it boils down, and I adopted that as finding the right teachers, make them better, and deliver to every child. And I think that's what the program does, right? And I think it also revolves all around the teachers. And I'm a big proponent of keeping talented staff, of making them better, before we talk of everything outside of our universe, our core staff, whether it's teachers or admin. And so what I'm trying to say is in regards to the SAL, I cannot assess what the SAL committee is, what the SAL committee, I cannot verify it. I'll take it for face value. But I also take it for face value what the staff and the admin has deemed the SAL contract as to be non-essential, for at least for this purpose. And my preference would be, as it relates to teacher pay, before we talk about talking about an SEL contract, which staff and everybody has deemed to be non-essential, I sure hope that the money, if any money is going to come in, and that's where my original vantage point is coming from, is going to go to teachers and admin staff for the hard work and the quality work they're doing. So unless somebody tells me that there is that this is absolutely essential, then I don't see any grounds for providing a preferential treatment. And I don't think we need to make the discussion today. So I'll accept what you have suggested, that we can postpone that decision a little bit regarding the SAL contract but because we're not having the proper proper foundation for it. So, but philosophically, you know, if we had more money to play with, I personally would like to see it going towards core staff. That's just my preference. And it doesn't mean that I'm not in favor of SEL. It is just a preference that I would just pay staff before I pay a consultant. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Pete?
So what we've learned is that I don't like PE, and Frank is mean-spirited and hates people who have motions. just kidding. Yeah, there are definitely some competing demands here, which of course is the issue. So understanding that PE as it's, and I might point out that the $5,000 savings could have paid for the SEL, but I'll leave that. Actually, I didn't leave it, did I? But those are the kind of choices. I mean, that's the kind of choices that the unfortunate choices that need to be made, and there has to be a trade-off. There's always going to be trade-offs. So I guess you know, we talk about the core mission. We talk about it's an IB school with German language. I don't know where these specials come into play on those. Now I understand that makes for a more well-rounded education, and I'm not saying that those things aren't important, but the problem I see, and we can see this in the 3-year budget, is that furloughs, and I appreciate that the admin is stepping up the way they are, but furloughs are not a structural change to the budget, right? We keep bantying about this notion of a structural change. It's clearly not a structural change, because what happens next year is that you instantly go into deficit, because the structure, it's only a temporary band-aid by going into furloughs, because you obviously can't repeat those one year to the next, otherwise you're not going to have staff, and rightfully so. So you need to think about what is actually part of the structure of what is being done and offered. And that's where I go back to these things like art or PE. And now we can add art to this list of things that I don't like, apparently. But those things are structure. And what we're doing is, and I guess, you know, if enough of us agree, then I guess that's fine. But what we're doing is we are fooling ourselves to think that we've done anything structurally, and then we're still banking on relatively massive increases in student enrollment, right? I mean, you've reduced the numbers, and that's fine, but and we can't see them right now, but we're going up 4 students this year, presumably, by adding an additional grade. So how do we expect to go up 40 students next year, or whatever the number is, by adding another grade? What leads us to believe, and then be up at 506 in the following year? Other than the first couple years of the school, ever since I've been a part of the board, enrollment has decreased. Well, maybe that's the problem, but I think it's disingenuous to say that we're making structural changes and trying to keep all these specials, and then hope that enrollment kicks in enough so that the temporary fixes will be okay in the subsequent years, right? That's what we're having. So that's so there's no specific comment on this particular round, just a dose of thinking about what we're trying to accomplish here.
Can I just comment?
Could I comment on that one?
Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks. I do want to point out that furloughs are not a structural change, and I agree with that, and that's why we did not put them into year 2 or year 3 moving forward. But to say that there's no structural change to this program, we made a $900,000 swing, okay, and $135,000 or whatever it is furloughs. So it's an $800,000 swing or $750,000 swing. That's structural. We've cut 3 teachers in this budget. That's structural. This is not kicking the can. And the reason why I say this is, let's face it, you're referencing to that happened year after year of a budget that just got kicked down the road. What I'm saying is, let's not decimate everything so that we can achieve that now. Let's make all these cuts, and there are a ton of them. Let's have furlough, which is not a cut and not a long-term structural change, and we'll try that to see if we can get through the year. I do believe we will have a much better situation next year if we are not in the COVID situation we're in now in terms of enrollment. I think we would be in a whole different place right now if there was no COVID in terms of that. And plus, we're working on all kinds of different ways of marketing that were never done before that will have an effect on enrollment. These things take time, and it's going to be over time that we get out of this hole. But I do think this does address a very large amount of structural deficit, not counting furloughs, because that does not. You're absolutely right. But that's where I think we have to balance out not gutting the program before we absolutely have to, because it'll never come back, and we'll never get to that point. And maybe we come to a point where we have to, but I don't believe that point's today. I'll leave it at that.
So I think that's exactly right, and I think that speaks to why decisions were made in the past that were, in some sense, kicking the can down the road, but also they were programmatic decisions, and also with a vision towards what will be in the future, so that it wouldn't be that budget, that kind of a deficit. So I think this round really is not so dissimilar from previous rounds as it might seem. But you have made, yes, and I should retract and say it, there definitely have been some structural changes. But that said, given this forward-looking vision, that leads me to come back to that, is it absolutely a requirement that the budget zeroes out this year, or, as Frank alluded to earlier, the whole point of having a reserve is that we can buffer a little bit and keep things that are part of the larger program and are very important. This is why I ask you what you thought were the most important things to put back in, so that we can get some sense of what is really meaningful to the running of the school, to the culture of the school. And if we're not worried about, if we're admitting to a vision for the future, then going over budget slightly is not the end all that it has to be. If in year 3 the positive value isn't 77,000 but 25,000, I think we've gotten to a good place. So that's what I'm trying to get out of the folks in the room.
All right, thank you, Pete. Danielle?
Yes. So I just wanted to share how I'm looking at this and my point of view. I'm definitely looking at this from my background, which is a corporate and business point of view. Keeping in mind that this is a school, so that's a whole different thing. But also, this school is a business, and that we have to keep this business moving forward, not just for next year, but all the years that follow, in order to keep this institution functioning. And I think the budget as it stands right now is pretty bare bones. And you guys did a really good job. I also like the insight and the input that there are things that maybe we could add back in after the school year starts, and we consider it further. But the two things that I've considered the most when we're thinking about this budget is preserving as much admin and staff as possible, because that's what we need to make this function. And typically, what corporations are doing and what companies do is they preserve the employees that exist within the organization, and they often eliminate consultants. Consultant positions are typically the first to go. regardless of how amazing those consultants were. So, you know, I just want to point out that we're asking admin to take a serious cut. We're asking teachers to also take a cut that will impact them a lot. And not to beat a dead horse about SEL, but the teachers, 80% of staff felt like that they could handle it without the support of our consultants. And, you know, given that we're asking everybody to take such a tremendous cut, I did want to point out that it could potentially be very demoralizing to admin and to teachers to see, okay, well, I'm taking a cut. This isn't something that I support, and that this is something that the board is pushing through regardless. So I wanted to mention that. I also wanted to touch on the fact that in no way is this a statement of racism. I believe that was implied in one of the comments prior, and this is in no way a statement of that. And I did want to, dismiss that from the record, because that did not sit well with me at all. I think that this school is very diverse and committed to diversity. And me personally, I don't want that type of something like that implied against my character. That's something that's absolutely not true. That's all I have.
Thank you, Danielle. And Beacon, just before I hand it off, I just want to make it abundantly clear to everyone, this is discussion. If you have questions directed to each board member, please be clear, but let's continue and be positive. Beacon, go ahead.
Yes, firstly to Frank. Frank, you say you can't figure it out, but multiple professionals, 2 clinical psychologists, have shared their point of view that this is something that is essential. Danielle, I'm not calling you a racist. I'm saying that when we talk about racism or race, part of the way, and diversity, part of the way that we lift people up and lift our young Black girls that we have many of in our school is by having them have staff that looks like them with them. Yes, our consultant is outside contracted, but she has been at the school probably longer than anybody else. So these are very, very important things to consider. This is not an amount that is making or breaking the budget. This is not a $50,000 or $70,000 salary. This is $7,200. And I mean, we can go in circles around this, and yes, it does feel like beating a dead horse, and I don't understand why. This is one of the most valuable things that we offer. This is what differentiates us from every other school out there. We talk about wanting to maybe take in private school people who will be leaving their private school. We have our very own social emotional learning consultant who is there, most importantly, for our kids, for our families, and also for our staff. That is part of her role, is to be there for our staff when they need help. And that includes teachers and admin alike.
So Deacon, sorry, and may I ask you a question? Would you be open to a proposal, because I believe Danielle, you said you would be open to revisiting this in August, that once Chris drilled down more on the deliverables of the contract, that we vote on it separately?
That was a question for Beacon, right? Not me.
Because I think Danielle, you said you were fine with that.
I said I was
right?
fine with you considering.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Beacon, would you, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. All right, then I will, if we can do one more round, I'd like to make this the last round before we do approve the budget. Frank?
I have asked the admin team to in leading up to this into this conversation, to clearly articulate the value and to comprehensively articulate the value of the SEL contract. I think we need that. As it stands right now, my position is fairly clear. I think work is not a charity, and good people need to get paid we need to get paid well, and we need to pay competitively. We're asking a lot from our staff to take pay cuts and then introduce a consultant. I can't reconcile this. I hear the benefits. And I hear both sides of the argument. But the preference of my decision is staff first before consultants. And I do need the comprehensive paper and elaboration from staff. What is the value of the SEL contract? And for that matter, I am okay with your proposal of voting for the budget and discussing the SEL contract with our next board meeting, or wherever we choose to. Thank you.
Yes, I believe I said, and give Chris enough time because we have the annual coming up and then summer break, and give him enough time to get the material. Thank you, Frank. Pete, final words?
Yeah. So I'm largely in agreement with Frank, and I absolutely agree that SEL is important, and I also know that, I mean, other schools do have SEL staff or consultants, but this consultant is really a bargain. I know another school it's like $50,000 a year, so so $7,500 or $5,000 or $2,700 or whatever the reduced value was. Any of those numbers are certainly probably a reasonably good investment. But here is my, but two things. One, I think we either vote it in now because it's ridiculous to say that it's not in the budget and then put it in the budget after the fact. It still has the same impact. So either we're honest and upfront and we say we're valuing this and this is going into the budget, or we don't. And so I think it should be part of the discussion, and we should finalize it right now. That said, I also agree with Frank, though, that and Danielle, and that consultants are really second to the staff that are currently on hand. And I would argue, which is what I was leaning towards in the last round, was that if we consider to put SEL in the budget, whether it's this week or next week, that we first designate an amount of funds that will go to reduce the impact of the pay reduction or furloughs or. So I would loosely propose that we allocate, this is why I say you'd be willing to go over budget, we allocate $20,000 above what's listed here, which can be divided up between SEL and staff, which could either be admin or maybe only teachers, and then use those funds to break out in some manner. That way, there's clear recognition that those that are here, the teachers, are important and valuable, but that we also consider some SEL services as being maybe not valued by the teachers, but likely implicitly valued to the school and by the students. So it's not explicit to the staff, but implicit a little bit more. So that would be where I'm thinking.
All right, Danielle.
I don't have any real additional comments. It's just, my position is staff and admin first.
Okay. Megan?
I don't have anything further to add.
So I would like to say, to Frank's point about consultants before staff, and this is based on my real life experience. Coming from a professional background, all of this is subjective. If your organization does not have the resources to expand, to grow, to cultivate new markets, to sell a new product, then a lot of companies will hire consultants, and a lot of companies will leverage consultants to make that leap of faith. So I think I think it's a matter of principle, and I have owned several businesses in the past, and I do share that belief, but it's also counterbalanced by the fact that could we do more? Could we increase our efficacy in reaching more children, to reaching a broader curriculum, not just academically based, but psychologically more well-rounded for our students? As far as, so to me, it's a matter of choice. The SEL part, but I do have to say that in previous board meetings, this is something like this has not come up, because it is a matter of choice. And I don't believe there's a right answer, and I don't believe there's a wrong answer. I believe there are very strong feelings for SEL, and specifically this consultant. But it's also about, I think what I heard, especially in public comment, is that it is part of what this school is. And the triadic agreement, and I did not recall this at the time, but it's absolutely true. The triadic agreement is a big part of our organization, and it is a part of our positive reinforcement tools for the children. And I recall, 2.5 years ago, when I first put our kids in the school, that is something that I thought was a refreshing way to, control the little devils that attend the school. Those are my devils, not anyone else's, which is very different with school, or at least the ones I'm used to. So I'd like to bring everyone back to what is our purpose, and our purpose is to ensure the vitality of the curriculum, not just for next year, but 2 years, 3 years, to make sure that this organization continues to share the great program with kids of all backgrounds and skin tones and socioeconomic statuses, and to offer the most promising and powerful program that we can. However, right now, as Pete, has mentioned, it's about resources, it's about what's most important. And for me personally, the budget is a matter of control. It is, what is the board controlling, and what comes out of it, or if there are extra things. I don't agree. I think the budget can be very nimble, and it is something that once I think board members have more concrete information, that it doesn't have to be part of the budget. This is not about pay cuts. This is not about losing art and PE. This is still saying that we value the service, and we will continue to value the service. We just need a little bit more information on what actually we're getting, because from what I've heard today, it is still a part of our program, and we need to accept it and then decide, do we pause this temporarily, or do we continue on the track that is. So that being said, I don't have anything further. I believe I can add to the conversation. So I will take it to a vote to approve the 2020-2021 budget as presented by Chris and Frank, Finance Committee. We will start with a roll call. Frank?
Aye.
Pete?
No.
Danielle?
Aye.
Beacon?
No.
Right, and that is an aye for me. Motion passes, the budget is approved. All right, so calendar and topics for upcoming board meetings. Anyone? All right.
I want to make sure I'm clear of the direction, which is we can implement the budget, but I'm also going to connect and bring back to the board an option with regard to the SEL contract with more detail.
That is correct, yes. With clear deliverables and a cost structure, not something that's nebulous and vague. Again, I'm sorry, I don't know what the contract stipulates, but I would imagine that.
Yazir, I support this. I'm willing to change my position on the SEL. I've heard both opinions, and but I'd rather. I insist on on having a comprehensive analysis of that, and it's absolutely critical. I encourage. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Can I add to that too? I would also appreciate to know what the deliverables are. I also wanted to make mention, with all due respect, we know that you are a co-chair of SEL, and at some point it can feel like a conflict, right? You're a board member and you're also the co-chair of SEL, and that might be that's a bit tricky, right? Because we all have our own conflicts as board members of the things that we're organizations we're a part of or companies that we work for, that we really can't bring that into a board meeting. And so, I don't know if there are any board guidelines around that. I'm not saying not to speak on behalf of SEL, but, just kind of that point of view of, that does bring a bit of a conflict into a board meeting when we are naturally voting on something SEL related.
So I think if I may interject, and I will
Sure.
give Deacon a chance to respond, but Danielle, I think that's a great conversation to have on our board development section of our board meetings, which we punted the last few. But I think that's because one of the things that was very important to me at the beginning of the year is every board is different, right? And if right now this board, we can cultivate how we want to ourselves, we can cultivate how we want to, what our protocol and policies are. To be absolutely clear, the board orientation guide does not mention this, and I think it would be a great chapter to add with contribution from all the board members here. So I think the conversation we should have separately, away from the budget and some of the more contentious things, but I do agree. So with that, Beacon.
Yeah, social emotional learning is our strategic differentiator, and it's an important one. And, I'm looking at this, I have my two hats on. I'm looking at it as a co-chair of the committee, but also as a board member. I think this is something that sets our school apart and makes our institution into something that feels more like a family, which I think people appreciate. And that's why we have so many families that are so committed to our school and so passionate about our school. And you've seen it for the way they show up for these meetings. And so strategically, I have no qualms about my position on this.
All right, thank you, Beacon. All right, so if there's nothing further, I would just like to add one more thing, and it is a very humble thank you to Scott and Biggie and Casey and Chris. I mentioned this to them. I had a conversation with them earlier today. But I think part of what makes the school so incredible is how much talent we have in the organization. And I will say that there are times I forget how much talent is in the organization and what I personally take for granted. This has possibly been one of the most transparent and rigorous processes that was shared with me. I have not been to any of the finance committee meetings, but the conversations that I have had with Chris have showcased for me that there were so many alternatives, so many different structures considered in order to arrive at a balanced budget. And also that just the sheer amount of work, I think as board members, I think we forget how much work and time and devotion goes into every single one of those line items and every single one of those that cuts so hard. I think everyone is on Team Goethe and committed to making this school a success. So thank you, Chris, and everyone on your administrative leadership team. You are the future of the school. I also like to thank the teachers. Without you, the school would nowhere be as successful as it is today. And though we will continue to have challenges, I know absolutely that we will overcome them. So with that being said, I would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Frank?
Aye.
Pete?
Yes.
Danielle?
Aye.
Beacon?
Yes.
All right, meeting is adjourned at, what time is it? 8:06 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Everyone, and I'll
Have a good
see you
rest of the
guys
day.
next
Thanks,
week.
guys.